They told me to serve drinks at my nephew's engagement party, not realizing I owned the estate they were celebrating in. I held the silver tray with both hands, the weight of the champagne glasses trembling slightly as I walked through the marble foyer. Laughter echoed from the grand ballroom, sharp, elegant, rehearsed. No one made eye contact. A sharply dressed woman in blue pointed toward a corner near the window. "Please don't stand in the middle of the room," she said without looking up from her phone. "You're ruining the photos." I smiled politely, nodded. My nephew's fiancée walked past, her satin dress shimmering under the chandelier. She wrinkled her nose at me, like I carried something sour in my pockets. I looked around at the gold-gilded vases, the carved staircase, the crystal sconces on the wall, and held back a chuckle. Because they didn't know. They had no idea the party they were showing off at the estate they were boasting about on Instagram and TikTok didn't belong to the groom's wealthy new in-laws. It belonged to me. And tonight, I was going to remind them exactly who I was. Before I tell you what happened next, how I turned from invisible server to the owner of everything they were standing on, I want you to stay with me until the very end. Because this isn't just about revenge or money. This is about being underestimated, overlooked, erased by your own blood, and what happens when you finally take back your place, not with noise, but with undeniable truth. If you've ever been ignored, humiliated, or made to feel small in a room you helped build, you're not alone. So watch closely. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. Because somewhere out there, someone is being treated like a nobody today, not realizing they hold the keys to the whole damn house. My name is Lorraine Whitmore. I'm 64 years old, and for most of my life, I was the woman people forgot to introduce at the dinner table, the woman they stepped past in designer heels, the woman who sat quietly in the back while the family bragged about their new cars, new jobs, new babies. But let me take you back, because this story didn't start in a mansion or at a party. It started in a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, with a sleeping baby and a stack of eviction notices. That baby was my son, Franklin, my pride and joy. His father left when Franklin was 3, left me with a broken heart, 2 part-time jobs, and no savings. I scrubbed floors during the day and worked night shifts at a bakery just to keep the lights on. My family? They didn't help. Lorraine made her bed. My sister Ruth used to say behind my back, "Let her lie in it." But I didn't just lie there, I worked. While they gossiped, I saved. While they went on vacations, I bought second-hand books on finance. I learned how to invest in land, property, and renovations, quietly, slowly, relentlessly. By the time Franklin was 12, I'd saved enough to buy a rundown cottage on 5 acres just outside the city. They all laughed at me when I bought it. "What are you going to do with that dump?" my brother-in-law scoffed at Christmas. I said nothing, but I knew what I was building. Over the next 20 years, I restored that land, planted vineyards, leased the garden out for weddings, converted the barn into a ballroom with glass ceilings and chandeliers that made people cry when they saw them lit at night. I called it Whitmore Estate. They never asked about it, never visited, never even knew it was mine. Because I didn't need them to know. Franklin grew up, became a software engineer, and moved to another state. I stayed behind and turned that estate into something that people paid 5 figures to rent for a single day. Still, every Christmas, every family gathering, I was treated like the aunt with the modest pension. And I never corrected them. Until last month, when I got the invitation. A hand-delivered card for my nephew Elijah's engagement party. My sister Ruth's son. The invitation was glossy and gold-trimmed, with words like black tie and cocktail service and exclusive location printed in cursive. No address. Just a note that the location will be revealed to confirmed guests only. I RSVP'd quietly. I didn't mention anything. Then 3 days before the event, I got a call from a familiar voice, Marcy, the estate's events manager. "Miss Lorraine," she said, "your family has booked the estate for a private engagement celebration. Saturday evening. They don't know it's yours, of course. You want to be there?" I remember laughing. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there, but not as a guest." There was a pause. "You want me to book you in the back or?" "No," I said. "I want to walk in like staff, like one of the servers." That's the moment I decided to let them feel what it's like to ignore someone who owns everything under their feet. Absolutely here. The evening of the party, I wore black slacks, a white button-down shirt, and a plain black vest, the usual uniform for servers at Whitmore Estate. My hair was tied back neatly. No makeup, no jewellery, just quiet dignity. Marcy handed me a tray of flutes filled with champagne, and I walked into the ballroom like I was meant to blend in because I was. That was the plan. And it worked. My own sister didn't recognize me. Ruth stood near the center of the room, laughing loudly, wearing a wine-colored dress that shimmered under the chandeliers, the ones I'd personally chosen from an estate sale in France. She didn't even blink when I passed by. Then I heard her voice. "Excuse me," she snapped, snapping her fingers like I was a bellhop. "The groom's parents need refills." I turned. She looked me dead in the face and didn't flinch. "Over there," she said, pointing toward the groom's table. "And please stay to the sides. This isn't a buffet." I nodded. "Of course." Inside, I swallowed hard. Not because of the insult, I was used to that, but because this was my sister, the same one who used to steal from my school lunch when we were kids, the same one who said she'd pray for me when Franklin was born. Now she looked through me like I was just service. As I made my way across the ballroom, I passed Elijah the groom, my nephew. He was laughing with his fiancée, Ava, tall girl, pretty, expensive taste. She glanced at me, then leaned into Elijah and whispered something. He chuckled. Then he looked up, right at me, and said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Can you not hover? You're in all the photos." I froze. He didn't even recognize his own aunt. The boy I used to babysit. The one I picked up from soccer practice when his parents forgot him. The one who used to call me Auntie Rain, because he couldn't say Lorraine. Gone. Ava gave me a once-over and scrunched her nose. "Did they get you from a temp agency or something? I swear we requested upscale staff." Another woman near her giggled. Maybe she came free with the glasses. I stayed silent, walked away. The worst part? My own relatives were watching and said nothing. Not Uncle Fred, not Cousin Lila, not even Franklin's godmother, Aunt Jeanette, who'd been in my house just last Easter. They all looked away, embarrassed, ashamed maybe, to be associated with someone who wasn't dripping in gold or clinging to a glass of rosé like it was a trophy. One moment stood out more than the rest. I was passing by the grand piano when Ava's mother, a woman named Tessa, stepped directly in front of me. "You," she said. "Yes, ma'am." She handed me a folded napkin. "Wipe the lipstick off the rims before you serve, please. We're not animals." She turned to her friend. "You really have to micromanage help these days." Then, as if I were invisible, she began talking about how beautiful the estate was. "Every detail is perfect," she said. "The vineyard, the pond, the arches over the garden. I heard the owner's some faceless investment group from Europe." No, someone else said. "I think it's a trust fund kid, real estate money or something." I couldn't help but smirk as I walked away. I passed the wine cellar, where I'd chosen every single bottle by hand. I passed the rose garden, where I'd planted each bush one spring in my 50s. And every step I took, I felt something in my chest start to simmer. Not anger, not even sadness. Something sharper. Clarity. These people didn't just disrespect me. They forgot who helped build them. They forgot the woman who used to give Elijah school clothes when his parents ran out of money before the term ended. They forgot the aunt who stayed late at the hospital with Ruth when she had surgery and no one else showed up. And when it was their time to shine, they stepped right over me. But the night wasn't over. And the part they never saw coming was about to begin. I stood just outside the ballroom, the tray finally set down on a side table, my palms aching from how tightly I'd gripped it. The laughter kept ringing out behind me, a sea of clinking glasses, designer perfumes, fake compliments, and phones angled for the best Instagram photo. I took a deep breath and slipped out the side door, down the path toward the vineyard. It was sunset. Golden light poured across the hills I once cleared myself, rock by rock, vine by vine. My boots were worn through back then. My hands raw from pulling weeds and digging trenches. My back sore from lifting sacks of soil I had no business lifting. But I did it. Not with help. Not with handouts. With grit. One broken fingernail and one tight budget at a time. I used to sit on this very hill with Franklin and eat peanut butter sandwiches, dreaming of what this land could be. And now, here we were decades later, and it had become everything I imagined. And still, I had let them shrink me. Again. It stung more than I expected. How easy it was for them to dismiss me. How comfortable they were in ignoring my face, my presence, my history. Like I was the hired help they could mock and order around. Like I hadn't been family. But that's the thing about people who measure worth by money or clothing labels. They don't recognize quiet power when it's in front of them. And I had stayed quiet too long. I walked slowly back toward the estate, through the private hallway behind the catering kitchen. My eyes caught a glimpse of a photo hanging near the staff area. Me, Franklin, and Marcy during the grand opening of the estate 8 years ago. We were younger then, smiling proudly with champagne glasses in hand. And yet tonight, they saw me and didn't even blink. That wasn't my failure, it was theirs. Because while they were busy chasing status and trying to impress each other, I was building something real, something lasting, something no one could take from me. But let me be honest, it took years to get here. Years of working when I was tired, of saying no to things I wanted so I could give Franklin the life he deserved. Years of being looked down on by my own family because I didn't live like them, because I didn't post vacation selfies or shop designer labels, because I chose stability over appearances. My sister Ruth? She always cared more about perception. When Elijah got accepted into college, she threw a party not because he wanted one, but because she wanted people to talk. When she found out Ava came from a powerful family, she practically started practicing her mother of the groom speech on Facebook Live. All she ever wanted was to seem important. I wanted to be it quietly. And now I was. But it wasn't enough to know the truth in silence. Not anymore. The struggle had made me strong, yes, but the growth was realizing I didn't need to hide anymore. I didn't owe these people my silence, not the relatives who ignored me, not the in-laws who mocked me, not the child I once raised who now couldn't even recognize me unless I was holding a tray. I stood in front of a mirror, in the powder room off the side hall, looked at myself, the pressed shirt, the tired eyes, the woman everyone dismissed tonight. Then I took off the vest. Then the tie. Underneath, I had on a soft plum blouse, something simple, elegant, but unmistakably me. I took a moment to fix my hair, put on the light pink lipstick I always kept in my purse. And then I walked back into the ballroom not as a server, but as the woman who owned the land beneath their feet Marcy saw me first. She was speaking with the head caterer near the service table. Her eyes widened, and she gave the tiniest nod. Then, as planned, she picked up the microphone from the side stage where the band had taken a break. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice bright, professional. "Before dessert is served, I just wanted to take a moment to thank the person who made this beautiful evening possible." The crowd turned, glasses lowered, phones poised. "Please help me welcome the owner of Whitmore Estate, Miss Lorraine Whitmore." The silence was immediate. I walked forward, slow, steady, heels clicking against the polished floors I had personally overseen the restoration of. You could hear a pin drop. My nephew Elijah squinted, confused. "Ruth!" She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Ava whispered something I couldn't hear, probably trying to figure out if this was a mistake. I reached the stage and gently took the microphone from Marcy. "Thank you," I said softly. "And thank you all for coming to my home." There were a few gasps, an audible whisper from Ava's mother. "Wait, what?" I looked directly at Ruth, who still hadn't blinked. "Some of you know me as just Lorraine, the quiet aunt, the one you see every few holidays. Maybe you thought I worked in a school cafeteria, or that I was just surviving." A few uncomfortable chuckles. "But I built this estate. Every brick, every garden, every piece of wine you're sipping came from something I planted, managed, or chose. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I believed in creating something bigger than myself." I turned to Elijah and Ava. "And I'm honored to host your engagement celebration. Truly." I paused, then added, "But next time, ask before assuming someone's worth based on what they're wearing." The room was stiff with tension. Forks clinked awkwardly against plates. Half of the guests were staring at their champagne glasses, suddenly unsure what to say. "My sister Ruth!" Her wineglass trembled in her hand. She hadn't spoken yet, not even moved, and I could tell why. She was humiliated. All the years she spent positioning herself as the better sister, the one who married well, hosted dinner parties, wore imported scarves. And now, her lie of a life was unraveling in front of everyone at a party hosted on my land, with my staff, drinking my wine. I didn't plan on saying more, but the silence was begging for it, so I did. I looked around the room. "I walked in tonight holding a tray," I said calmly, "and not a single member of my own family said hello." A hush swept over the room. I was told to stay out of photos, to serve quietly. One person even asked if I came from a temp agency. My gaze swept over Ava's family. Funny, isn't it? No one laughed. I turned toward Elijah. My own nephew looked me in the face and didn't recognize me, and rather than ask, he said I was ruining the pictures. Elijah's mouth parted slightly. I didn't know." "You didn't want to," I said. "That's worse." He lowered his eyes. "I raised you, Elijah. I picked you up from preschool, sewed your Halloween costumes, and paid for your braces when your mum's insurance wouldn't cover them. But tonight, I was just background noise." He started to speak again, but I held up a hand. "Don't explain. Just listen." I turned to Ruth, who was now flushed, the colour draining from her face. "You always thought I was less than you. Because I wore thrift store clothes. Because I worked with my hands. Because I didn't ask you for favours." Ruth's voice cracked. "Lorraine, I didn't know." "No," I said, my voice firmer. "You didn't want to know. You raised your kids to believe I was the sad aunt, the one who couldn't keep a man or afford a real vacation. You fed that story for years, even when you knew better. People were now looking between us like it was a live theatre performance." I softened my tone. "I let it slide. For decades, I let it slide. Because I didn't want to be petty. I thought it was enough to know the truth quietly." I paused. But sometimes silence helps the wrong people sleep better. I looked at Ava now, the young bride-to-be, still clutching Elijah's arm, still blinking like she couldn't compute what was happening. You were rude to me, Ava. To someone you thought was hired help. You mocked my clothes, my face. You whispered like I couldn't hear you, but I did. And the worst part? I nodded toward her mother. You learned it from somewhere. Ava's mouth tightened, but she didn't deny it. Her mother bristled. We didn't know you were the owner. That's the point, I said. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with decency. Marcy stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching everything unfold. She gave me a subtle nod like she was proud of me. And I realized I was proud of me. All these years I'd carried myself small, humble, almost invisible. Not anymore. I turned back to the crowd. So let me make this clear for everyone, not to shame anyone, but to set the record straight. I gestured around the room. This estate, it's mine. Whitmore Estate exists because I believed in it, because I sacrificed for it, and because I never stopped working for it even when people told me I didn't belong in places like this. I took a breath. You don't have to clap. You don't even have to like me, but you will respect me. A pause. Then, finally, someone started clapping. It was one of the staff members, then another, then Marcy, then a few hesitant guests. Within seconds, half the room was applauding, unsure if they were doing it out of guilt or admiration, probably both. But Ruth, she didn't clap. She walked up to me slowly, her heels clicking against the tile. Lorraine, she said softly, her voice shaking. Why didn't you ever say anything? I looked her in the eyes. Because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I had. She blinked back tears. I didn't mean to hurt you. I guess I assumed you were happy staying small. I was never small, I replied. You just chose not to see me. She opened her mouth, but no words came, just a shaky breath. And then she stepped back. The confrontation had happened not with shouting, not with revenge, but with truth. Clear, undeniable. And the turning point, it wasn't just them realizing who I was. It was me realizing I didn't need their validation anymore. I stepped off the stage and handed the mic back to Marcy. Elijah, I said over my shoulder. Congratulations, and Ava, I hope you grow out of what you've learned, because marriage will teach you humility one way or another. The crowd parted as I walked through. I didn't storm off. I didn't need to. The power was mine the moment I stopped waiting for them to treat me like I mattered. I already did. I didn't stay for dessert. By the time I stepped outside, the night air had cooled. The garden lights glowed softly along the stone path, casting a warm shimmer across the fountain, the same one I had installed after saving for it for nearly a year. My heels echoed quietly as I walked toward the guest house behind the main hall. Marcy was waiting by the staff entrance, arms folded, a knowing smile on her face. You sure you don't want to go back in? She asked. They're all eating pie and pretending nothing happened. I laughed gently. No need. I said what needed to be said. She nodded. You said it perfectly. And she was right. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself to keep the peace. I had finally taken up the space I'd earned. Not just in that ballroom, but in my own life. I sat down on the bench by the lilac bushes, the same ones Franklin and I planted when he was 14. He'd be visiting next month with his kids, my grandbabies, and I knew I'd tell him the story. Not out of bitterness, but so he'd know that dignity doesn't come from titles or tuxedos. It comes from standing tall, even when no one claps for you. And now, I had peace. They might not apologize. They might keep their distance after tonight, but that was okay, because I hadn't spoken up to earn their praise. I spoke up because I finally saw myself clearly, and I wanted them to see me too, one last time, before I walked away for good. So to you watching this, if you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong, if you've ever been mistaken for less than you are because of the way you dress, speak, or carry yourself, let this be your reminder. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. But when the time comes, don't be afraid to show them who you are. Quiet success is still success. Quiet dignity is still power. And your story, just like mine, might one day be the moment that turns everything around. If this story touched something in you, don't scroll away just yet. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been underestimated? Ignored? Treated like less? Let's talk about it. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it to them. Because the world doesn't need louder people. It needs braver ones. I'm Lorraine Whitmore, and I own the estate. Thank you for watching.